Look, when y'all hear the phrase, the woman who can walk away controls everything, sometimes folks mistake it for being harsh or emotionally shut off. But let me be crystal clear right now. This ain't about playing games or pretending you don't care. It's about a whole different kind of strength. One that's rooted not in checking out of love, but in being attached to yourself. The woman who can walk away ain't emotionless. She feels deeply. She wants connection, but she never lets her desire for somebody else override her value for herself. She don't let her emotions hold her hostage. She knows that loving somebody don't mean surrendering her standards. And it sure don't mean sacrificing her peace. That kind of woman is powerful, not because she's controlling, but because she's in control of her life, her energy, and her boundaries. Now listen, most people think control in relationships comes from trying to manage the other person, what they say, what they do, how they feel about us. But that ain't real control. That's just insecurity wearing a costume. Real control is internal. It's knowing that no matter what the other person does, you're going to be okay. That you're not relying on somebody else to complete you. You're choosing them to complement you. And here's the shift, y'all. When you don't need somebody to choose you, that's when you become the most powerful choice. Because you're no longer coming from desperation. You're coming from discernment. Think about it. How many people stay in relationships long past the point they know it's right for them? They stay because they're scared. Scared they won't find better. Scared they'll be alone. Scared they're asking for too much. And when fear drives your decisions, you start compromising your standards. You start shrinking yourself. You start begging for breadcrumbs and calling it love. But the woman who can walk away don't do that. Not because it's easy, but because she's trained herself to value peace over chaos, self-worth over validation, and long-term fulfillment over short-term comfort. And this ain't about giving ultimatums or threatening to leave every time somebody messes up. It's much more subtle and a whole lot more powerful than that. It's the quiet confidence of knowing if this don't honor me, I'm letting it go. That kind of energy, it changes the whole game. Because the moment somebody senses that you can walk, not because you don't care, but because you care deeply about yourself, it creates a shift. It sets a standard. Suddenly, you're not the one sitting by the phone waiting for a text, overanalyzing their tone, or trying to fix everything to make it work. You're not trying to earn your place in somebody's life. You're simply watching to see if they're worthy of a place in yours. Now, there's a difference between attachment and addiction. One nurtures you, the other drains you. And the woman who can walk away knows the difference. She knows when love starts to cost her her joy, her dignity, or her peace. It's too expensive. Now, let me be real with you. Walking away don't always look strong. Sometimes it feels like heartbreak, like disappointment, like letting go of a dream. But strength ain't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just choosing not to answer the text you want to answer because you know it'll lead you right back into a cycle you've outgrown. Sometimes it's waking up alone instead of waking up next to somebody who makes you feel lonelier than being alone ever could. And I get it. It's not always easy. But every time you choose yourself, you're reconditioning your mind. You're saying, I am enough. I am worth choosing. And if somebody else can't see that, it don't mean I need to try harder. It means I need to walk away. And here's the kicker, folks. People feel that energy. They feel when you're in a place of wholeness, versus a place of lack. When you have the ability to walk, you're not negotiating from fear. You're standing in truth. And that makes people show up differently around you. Some will rise to meet you. Others will fall away. And that's okay. You're not for everybody. And you are never meant to be. You're not meant to be chosen by somebody who needs you to shrink first. You're meant to be chosen exactly as you are. So when I say the woman who can walk away controls everything, I don't mean she manipulates the game. I mean she transcends it. She lives on a different level. Because when you know your worth, you stop chasing what costs you it. The woman who can walk away don't just know her power. She lives it. And that's what makes her unforgettable. When you hear somebody say, the woman who can walk away controls everything, it's easy to assume it's all about playing hard to get. But it's so much deeper than that. It's about something far more powerful. It's standards. Now look, standards ain't about being difficult. They're not about being bossy or rigid or having some crazy checklist nobody can live up to. Standards are about your worth. They're about the way you teach the world how to treat you by the way you treat yourself. A woman with high standards ain't out here trying to control anybody. She's not controlling. She's clear. She knows what she values. She knows what she's not willing to compromise on. And she ain't afraid to stand in that truth, even if it means being alone for a while. Now, here's the truth most people won't tell you. High standards don't scare off the right people. They scare off the wrong ones. And that's exactly what they're supposed to do. If somebody disappears because you wouldn't settle for bare minimum effort, you haven't lost a thing. You've saved your time. You've spared your heart. You've created space for somebody better. That's not rejection. That's clarity. Too often we confuse being chosen with being valued. So we start shrinking. We lower the bar just to keep somebody around. We tell ourselves, maybe I'm asking too much. Maybe I need to be more flexible. Maybe if I just hang on a little longer, they'll come around. But deep down, we know we're bargaining with our self-respect. The woman who can walk away don't negotiate her non-negotiables. That's what makes her powerful. Not because she's threatening to leave, but because she don't need to stay where love ain't being honored. Think about it. We live in a world where everybody is afraid of being alone. So what do most people do? They settle. They cling, they compromise over and over again until they don't even recognize themselves. But the woman who can walk away, she don't fear solitude. She chooses it over settling. And that's where the real control is. Because the minute you're willing to lose somebody who isn't showing up for you, you stop being afraid. You start being free. And in that freedom, you become magnetic. Now look, there's a reason people are drawn to women who know their worth. It's not arrogance. It's alignment. It's the way she holds herself. It's the peace she has from knowing she don't have to chase love. She is love. She brings value into every space she enters. So she don't waste energy trying to convince anybody of her worth. And the moment you stop trying to convince somebody to see you, the moment you start living like somebody already worthy, the game changes. You stop vesting in potential. You start responding to patterns. You stop over-explaining your needs and you start expecting them to be met. Not through entitlement, but through self-respect. When you have standards, you're not saying you need to be perfect. You're saying you need to be intentional. You need to be consistent. You need to meet me where I am, or I'm willing to walk away with love, with peace, but with certainty. You don't do it to manipulate. You do it because your peace is more important than somebody's promise. You do it because energy speaks louder than words. You do it because your time is sacred, and you don't waste sacred things on temporary people. So many of us think we need to do more to be chosen. But the truth is, when you know your value, you start doing less chasing, less explaining, less tolerating, because you realize somebody who actually values you won't need to be convinced. They'll recognize you. The irony is, the woman who can walk away doesn't actually want to. She's not looking for a reason to leave. She wants to stay. She wants connection. She wants to love fully and deeply, but she's not willing to abandon herself in the process. And because she's willing to leave, if she's not being loved the right way, she ends up attracting the kind of person who is ready to love her that way. The kind of person who don't take her for granted, who steps up, who sees her clearly and says, I'm not letting this one go. That's why the woman who can walk away controls everything. Most people think love is about being available, always there, always giving, always present. But what they forget is that availability without value is just noise. When something is always there, always giving and never stepping back, it starts to get taken for granted. Not because people are bad, but because that's human nature. We value what we could lose. And that's why the woman who can walk away, who knows when to lean back instead of always leaning in, who can say, this ain't enough for me, without raising her voice, she becomes the one everybody wants. When you carry the ability to walk away, you don't have to use it as a threat. It speaks for itself. That's the paradox. The woman who can say, I don't need this situation to define my worth, is the one who shifts the entire dynamic. She becomes scarce in a world full of people clinging desperately to things that ain't good for them. That scarcity creates value because we chase what we fear we could lose, and we respect what don't need us to survive. You see, most people enter relationships like gamblers at a slot machine. They keep pulling the lever, hoping that this time something changes. But the woman who understands her value knows when to stop feeding a machine that ain't paying out. She don't keep spending her emotional energy on somebody who isn't reciprocating. And when she steps back, she don't do it to punish or manipulate. She does it because she knows that her energy, her presence, her love, all of it is valuable. And you don't just give value to anybody who hasn't earned it. That's the kind of woman who don't chase validation. She don't stay just to prove she's lovable. She knows that her love is a gift, and she's willing to reserve it for somebody who understands that. And that kind of energy, that's rare. That's what makes somebody turn their head and think, wait, I don't want to lose her. Not because she's playing games, but because she's living in alignment with her standards. It's not about being cold. It's not about being aloof or distant. It's about being clear. Clear on what you want, what you deserve, and what you're not willing to tolerate. And when you're clear, your energy becomes magnetic. You stop sending mixed signals. You stop accepting half effort. You stop tolerating potential, and you start honoring reality. That's the switch. That's when everything changes. And here's what's interesting. The second you stop chasing somebody's attention, you create the space for their desire to grow. But even more importantly, you create the space for your peace to return. Because that peace is where your power lives. Not in obsessing over somebody's texts, not in overanalyzing every interaction, not in convincing somebody to see your worth. Your power lives in knowing that your life continues beautifully, fully, unapologetically, with or without them. The moment you become willing to walk away, you stop negotiating with your self-worth. You stop shrinking to fit somebody else's comfort zone. You stop overcompensating for what somebody else lacks, and you start standing taller. Not because you're arrogant, but because you finally remembered who you are. And when you carry that energy, the energy of a woman who can walk away, you don't need to control anything. You already control everything because your presence becomes a choice, not a default. And the truth is, not everybody will rise to meet you when you walk in that power. Some will let you go. Some won't even notice. And that's okay. Because the woman who can walk away don't fear that. She trusts that the right person will recognize her value without needing to be chased, fixed, or convinced. And in the meantime, she's not waiting. She's growing. She's living. She's glowing. Because when you know you can walk away, you know you don't have to. You're not acting from fear. You're acting from strength. And that strength is what changes the game completely. She becomes the prize. You don't need to convince somebody to love you the right way. That's one of the most liberating truths you'll ever learn. And yet, it's where so many people get stuck. They think if they can just say the right thing, or prove their loyalty, or show how much they care, then the other person will finally start treating them the way they deserve. But love don't work like that. Relationships ain't negotiations where one side pleads for what they need and the other finally gives in out of guilt or obligation. Real connection, genuine, mutual, respectful love don't require convincing. It requires alignment. What you have to understand is this. Your energy teaches people how to treat you. Not your words, not your lectures, not the long texts explaining your worth, or the late night phone calls, hoping they'll understand. It's your energy. How you show up, what you tolerate, what you walk away from. That tells somebody everything they need to know about how they can show up with you. Now look, when you tolerate inconsistency, you tell somebody that your time ain't valuable. When you make excuses for somebody's bad behavior, you communicate that you will accept less than you deserve. When you keep giving chances to somebody who don't make the effort to meet you halfway, your energy says, I'll stay as long as you give me just enough to hope. Now, don't mistake that for being weak. It's not weakness. It's fear. It's the fear that maybe this is the best you're going to get, that maybe love means being patient to the point of self-abandonment, that if you leave, you won't find anything better. But the truth is, every time you betray your own boundaries to keep somebody in your life, you teach them that their comfort matters more than your dignity. Imagine for a moment what it feels like to be around somebody who don't chase, don't cling, don't explain herself endlessly, but instead stands in her calm, unwavering value. She's kind but clear. She's loving, but she won't settle. That woman teaches people how to love her, not through demands, but through her presence. Her energy speaks louder than any speech she could give. And that's what makes her unforgettable. When somebody starts to notice that you're not afraid to lose them, it changes the dynamic. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're grounded in the reality that you are already whole. You're not looking for somebody to complete you. You're looking for somebody to complement the life you've built. the self-respect you embody, the peace you refuse to give up for chaos masquerading as passion. This don't mean you never open up. It don't mean you close your heart or become guarded or cold. It means you stop begging to be chosen. You stop offering more than you receive, hoping it'll inspire somebody to change. You stop tolerating patterns that leave you drained, anxious, or confused. And you start choosing calm over chaos, consistency over potential, clarity over confusion. You want to change how somebody treats you? Stop explaining and start demonstrating. Pull your energy back from what ain't feeding your soul. Let your absence be felt instead of making your presence too easy to misuse. Because when somebody realizes you are capable of walking not out of anger, but out of self-respect, that's when the power shifts. That's not manipulation. That's truth. And it's not about punishing anybody either. It's about alignment. If somebody really wants to be with you, they'll rise. If they don't, they'll fall away. And that's a gift. That's clarity. You're not here to raise somebody into loving you properly. You're here to meet somebody who already does. So, the next time you feel that urge to explain why you deserve better, take a step back and ask yourself, does my energy match my standard? Am I showing up like somebody who believes she is worthy of being loved fully, deeply, and consistently? Because if you are, you won't need to convince anybody. You'll either be met at your level or you'll walk away with your dignity intact, knowing that doing so created space for something greater. The woman who can walk away don't do it to prove a point. She does it because she don't need to prove anything at all. Walking away ain't losing, it's choosing. It's one of the most powerful decisions a woman can make. And yet, it's so often misunderstood. Look, we've been conditioned to think that leaving means we failed. That if a relationship don't last, we somehow didn't try hard enough. But that couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, walking away when done from a place of clarity and self-respect is one of the highest forms of self-love there is. Think about it. It's easy to stay. It's easy to keep hoping that somebody will change, that things will improve, that love will somehow be enough to fix what's broken. We tell ourselves stories to justify the time we've invested. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe I just need to be more patient. Maybe they're going through a phase. And in the process, we shrink, we bend. We compromise not just on our standards, but on our peace, on our joy, on our essence. But the woman who can walk away sees clearly. She knows that love ain't just about how much you feel. It's about how you're treated. It's about how consistently somebody shows up. It's about whether you feel safe, seen, and cherished. And if those things ain't there, she's willing to choose herself. Even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when every part of her wants to hold on. That's what most people don't understand. Walking away ain't emotionless. It's not cold. It's not done out of spite or ego. It's done out of alignment. It's choosing truth over comfort. It's saying, I love you, but I won't lose myself to keep you. And here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you embrace that mindset, you stop needing control. And that's when you actually have it. Not control over the other person, but over your own life. You stop trying to force outcomes. You stop auditioning for love. You stop negotiating your value. You just are. And that kind of presence is incredibly powerful because when somebody knows you're willing to walk, not as a threat, but as a quiet truth, they show up differently. If they really care, they rise. They meet your energy. They realize that your love is a privilege, not a guarantee. But if they don't, well, then you've just saved yourself months, maybe years of trying to convince somebody who was never really in it. Look, we spend so much time trying to win people over. We think if we just do more, give more, prove more, they'll finally see our worth. But what we forget is that our worth don't increase because somebody recognizes it. It's already there. The problem is never whether you're enough. The question is whether they're capable of seeing what's right in front of them. And if they're not, that's not your burden to carry. That's your cue to let go. Letting go don't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough about yourself to stop waiting for somebody else to catch up. It means you trust that better exists, that you won't die from heartbreak, but you can die a slow emotional death by staying in places that don't nourish your soul. So many people ask, but what if I walk away and they never come back? And my answer is always the same. If they don't come back, they weren't meant to stay. And if they do, then it wasn't your walking away that pushed them away. It was the wake-up call they needed. Either way, you win because you're no longer living in fear. You're living in integrity. And that's where your true power lives. It's not about playing games. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about actually reaching that point where your self-respect overrides your attachment, where your standards are no longer negotiable, where you'd rather be alone than in a relationship that makes you feel lonely. And yes, it takes courage. It takes strength to walk when your heart is still holding on. It takes clarity to move forward when your mind keeps replaying the good moments. But over time, you start to realize something profound. Every time you choose yourself, life opens up for you. New doors appear. New people, new energy, new opportunities. They come rushing in because you made space for them. You can't receive what's meant for you if your hands are full of what's not. And that's the quiet magic of walking away. It's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter, one where you are the author, not just a character in somebody else's narrative. So don't ever let anybody tell you that walking away is giving up. It's not. It's a declaration that says, I am worthy. I am enough. And I won't settle for less than what honors me. That's not weakness. That's strength. That's power. That's control. And the woman who lives from that place controls everything. The ultimate control don't come from trying to make somebody love you. It don't come from playing it cool, sending perfectly timed texts, or crafting some ideal version of yourself you think they'll like. The real power, the kind that changes everything, comes from freedom. And I'm not talking about the kind of freedom where you shut down, pretend you don't care, or live in a constant state of aloof detachment. I'm talking about the freedom that comes from genuinely knowing that you will be okay with or without this person. Because the woman who can walk away, she's already free. She's not waiting for somebody to make her feel worthy. She's not basing her self-esteem on whether or not somebody chooses her. She's already chosen herself. And that kind of freedom, emotional freedom, is magnetic. When you walk into a relationship from a place of security and self-worth, you don't need the relationship to work out to feel good about yourself. You want it. Sure, you care. You love. You're in it, but you're not trapped by it. You're not afraid of the idea of it ending because you're not clinging to it as your only source of joy or validation. That changes everything. Because when you're free, you're not driven by fear. You're not bending your boundaries to keep somebody. You're not tolerating mixed signals, emotional crumbs, or hot and cold behavior just to avoid being alone. You're not staying quiet when something hurts you because you're afraid speaking up might push them away. You're not performing for love. You're simply showing up as you, and you're willing to walk if that's not enough for somebody. That kind of presence makes people pay attention. It commands respect without demanding it. When somebody senses you're free, not in an I don't care way, but in an I know who I am way, they realize that they're in the presence of somebody with options. Somebody who chooses them, but don't need them to feel whole. That's the woman who sets the tone in a relationship. That's the woman who don't get strung along, who don't get breadcrumbed, who don't chase, beg, or explain her worth to somebody.